Hi, I'm Jim Harold, and there has been a lot of UFO news lately. We're going to get a deep dive with Ryan Sprague to tell us what's going on. What in the world is going on with UFOs? And our guest today is Ryan Sprague of SomewhereInTheSkies.com. Of course, he has his great video podcast, his audio podcast, his book. He's a great guy, a great writer. He writes for the Debrief, and we'll talk about that. And we're so glad to have him with us. Ryan Sprague, welcome to the show, and looking forward to doing a deep dive on UFOs. What's going on? Because it seems like there's a lot going on these days.
There really is, Jim. I mean, well, we've all been going stir crazy with lockdowns and everything in the world. It's been probably the most exciting time for us UFO researchers these past 6 months or so. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to diving deep with you today for sure.
Now, it seems like there's been an acceleration. You might have had a story, a few years ago, you have a big story once a year. That would be a big thing. Then it started to go faster. It seems, is it just me or is it really accelerating these days?
It has. I mean, I remember speaking to you recently and writing an article over at your website all about how things have changed in the past few years with this topic. And look, ever since that 2017 article in the New York Times, I know people are probably sick of hearing about it now, but that was the moment that really everything changed when a mainstream news outlet like the New York Times took this topic as serious as it did. It's been kind of a huge, drastic change the way the mainstream media is perceiving this topic and disseminating it out to the public. So for us in the UFO research field, that sense of ridicule and stigma is shedding every single day, and it seems that every week now we're getting new news and articles about how either the military or the government plans on handling this issue, the UFO or UAP issue. So it's exciting, and I'm living it, man. I'm living it every single moment and loving every second of it.
Now, recently, I love when kind of erudite sources, or maybe sources you don't expect, come out and speak to this. And one of the foremost things that's happened over the last couple of months has been astrophysicist from Harvard, Avi Loeb, talking about this object that came near to us that he said may have actually been a scout. And to me, when you've got people like that with that kind of credentials, that kind of CV saying, hey, wait a minute, there's something here, and there may really be something here. Literally, there may have been something here. And you had a chance to talk with him a couple of weeks back. Talk to us about what he claims might have passed very close to Earth.
Right. So I did have the honor of interviewing Avi right before this book came out that he recently wrote called Extraterrestrial. And I'm sure some of your viewers and listeners might remember back in 2017, the first ever that we know of, first ever interstellar object came into our galaxy, Omuamua, named after Scout, as you mentioned, the Hawaiian word for scout. And the object was first sighted by an observatory in Hawaii. So that's why they basically got to name it. But the name is very curious, Scout. So why was it called that? Well, Avi Loeb believes that whatever this object was that came into our galaxy, that it might have been artificial, and it may have actually been from an extraterrestrial intelligence. I mean, this thing was flat, it was long, it was saucer shaped, as it were, and it seemed to have no signs of propulsion. This was not a meteor, it was not an asteroid, there was no gaseous tail on the end of this thing. So scientists were baffled. What was this thing? And how was it able to come in, stop, change direction, trajectory, and leave our solar system? So Avi believes possibly it could have had some sort of propulsion that we are not aware of, or an intelligence behind it, and that's why it was able to come in, scout out our galaxy, and leave. So absolutely fascinating. I had an hour-long conversation with him all about why he believes this could be artificial and why it's not the last object that we're going to see do this. And absolutely fascinating. We went through the physics of how they sort of were able to deduce the shape of this thing and possibly how it moved into our galaxy and left. And it's crazy, Jim. I mean, when you have a Harvard physicist, astrophysicist saying this could be alien and it's the first ever object that came in and left and that it's artificial, it blew my mind. And it really shows that mainstream scientists are taking the topic of alien life seriously. So I was deeply honored to have him on the show. I highly suggest people listen. We got really in depth with it. But if someone from Harvard is saying this is happening, we have to listen. We really do.
And I almost wonder, I'm sure that he's had some ridicule because of this, and maybe some people saying, his academic friends and colleagues and so forth. But it doesn't matter. I think if you look at almost any major scientific theory throughout the years, it started as maybe people who weren't even in science kind of postulating on it. And then it would take one brave soul to say, hey, I think that there's something here. One brave soul who had some standing. And then almost usually what would happen is all the other people with academic standing would say, oh, you're crazy. That makes no sense. And then one would come along and two would come along. And all of a sudden, it becomes the conventional wisdom with the academics or the keepers of knowledge. And it seems like he might be one of those people who is a vanguard of this and who is leading the charge, as it were. And maybe we'll hopefully some academics will look at what he's doing and saying, I don't necessarily agree with him, but let me take a second look at this.
Exactly. I mean, I remember even in my interview, he stated, he was in the Israeli army for a little while. Growing up in Israel, you do have to join the army as a young
Sure,
man,
compulsory, yeah.
and he specifically said we have this term in the army of being the first on the barbed wire, and he compares that to his work right now. Maybe he's being ridiculed. Maybe mainstream science hasn't caught up to what he's doing yet, or maybe he's completely wrong. He's not saying this is the be all end all and that this was an alien artificial object coming to check us out, but it's a possibility. And a lot of conservative mainstream science doesn't want to look at that possibility. And he says that's wrong. We owe it to the public to look at every possible theory of what this could be, because hey, if it's going to come back, we have to be ready for it. So he's working right now to come up with new ways of trying to monitor these objects before they leave so that we can get imaging on it, so we can get video and try to understand what these things are. So yeah, I do see him as, like you mentioned, a vanguard and someone who's willing to risk their reputation to put this out there. So I highly respect that. These rebellious people in the scientific community, we need them, especially for the younger generation who's willing to think outside of the box.
And then I was wondering, well, why would an alien society or civilization do it this way? But if you think about it, if they come to Earth and they land on the White House lawn, the prototypical landing on the White House lawn, it might be almost too much. But if they could just do a little drive-by and then figure there's going to be some sharp scientists who figure this out, and maybe next time they visit a little closer, maybe if it's almost a way of preparing us for a more direct visitation. What do you think about that?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I know you and I spoke recently about how we send probes to Mars, and we're sending a probe to Europa at one point. We do this where we send unmanned missions to planets to seek things out before we actually put a human being there and risk that, So maybe that's what these civilizations are doing, if they are out there, these intelligences, I should say. So I think it's very possible that, yeah, maybe that was just their first little drive-by. Maybe this is the first time this intelligence has come into our galaxy to scope things out. Doesn't mean others haven't done it in the past. And they're like, okay, we saw enough. Let's come back and get a little closer next time. So I love doing those hypotheticals because they could one day become fact.
And everybody, we will be fielding your questions for Ryan so he can answer some of your questions. So as we go along, you could type in your questions and we will field them and surface them to Ryan. And please be polite. That's the rule. You can say, hey, I don't believe in this UFO stuff. I really believe in it. That's fine. Just always be nice and polite. That's all we ask from our spooktators, as we call them. Anyway, Ryan, I know you're doing some writing for the Debrief, right? Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. What's one of the stories you're writing about over there? Tell us a little bit about the site and one of the stories over there that really got your attention that you've written recently.
Yeah, I mean, we are pumping out 2 to 3 articles every single day over at the Debrief. So for any of your listeners who aren't aware, this new site, news media site, was launched by our good friend and colleague Micah Hanks, is the creator of the entire thing. And he took on some other partners, MJ Banias being one of them, very well known in the UFO field, and another gentleman named Tim McMillan. And I sort of came on board and said, hey, if you guys need writers, I'm here. Like I'm not working. Please put me to work. And they really have. I'm pumping out stuff every single day, just like many other contributors right now. And it's a site that focuses mainly on emerging science, disruptive technology, and defense, and even UFOs. So there have been a few opportunities where I've really got to stretch my muscles as a writer and cover things I normally wouldn't. Science, technology, which is really cool. And one of my most recent articles, I think, is one of the big ones over at the site right now. And it was about a Chinese astronomer, cosmologist, who is working right now with FAST, which is this brand new radio telescope in China, the biggest and the most powerful radio telescope on the planet right now. Previously, it was the Arecibo in Puerto Rico, but unfortunately, it collapsed this past December. So now China has the most powerful telescope in the world. So this guy, his name is Zhang, he is a professor in China, and he wants to use the telescope to look for signals of alien life, SETI, as it were. So he's been working in cooperation with SETI here in the United States on how to do that. Because, this telescope in China, their first mission is not to look for alien signals. It's to do many other things in the astronomical world. So they said, yeah, we'll give you time with the telescope. You have 17.5 hours total to use it. So he said, okay, all right, I really have to make this worth my time. So he's working with SETI in the United States to target certain planets, certain star systems, on where he thinks there may be a possibility of intelligence. Is it habitable? Is it in a habitable zone? Could there be an intelligence there? So I talked to him all about the places he chose, why he chose them, and what he thinks will come of it. And he's convinced that China will be the first to make contact with an alien intelligence through this radio telescope. So we've got this kind of cool SETI Cold War happening right now, where it's a race between us and China. All political tensions aside from the nations, they are working together, but it is a race to see who will find ET first. So I hope people will go check that out. And I think it's so cool that they're working together on this.
Yeah, I do think that's neat. And that's a very interesting thing. And do check that out. I wish Micah well with that. I think that's a very, very interesting project that he's headed out on. Phil has a question. Phil asks, Ryan, my question would be, did Omuamua really change course? Was it documented? He said, I had to look up the name so tricky to spell and to pronounce. I had to ask Ryan about 3 times before we started to make sure I was doing it right.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of a transplant. I spent a lot of time in Hawaii recently, just to escape New York City, as I'm sure you can hear in the background, the subways at points during this conversation. But Oumuamua, that's correct. From what I know and what I was told by Avi, yes, this thing literally stopped as it got closer to the sun. And one might say maybe it's because of the radiation coming off of the sun. There is this technology that Avi and other, aerospace scientists are looking at right now of how to propel things using the sun. And Avi is using this technology called solar winds or light winds, light sails, where you use mirrors to reflect the radiation of the sun and propel an object forward. So he theorizes maybe this object, Oumuamua, had some sort of light sail technology where it was literally surfing off the waves of the sun to get out of there. So, yes, as far as I'm aware, it changed trajectory and left the solar system. So, pretty crazy. And, a natural asteroid or meteor would not do that the way that this object did, according to Avi. So, I think it's exciting. And again, it kind of moves us to the possibility that this could have been an artificial object of some kind.
John asks, if they're advanced enough to come here and outperform our best aircraft, is it possible that they know what's on our internet and airwaves regarding speculation on them? And I will say this, Ryan, and I'm sure you would agree. If they're out there watching right now, we'd both love to do a joint interview with them, and they're welcome on our respective programs anytime.
I do think, Jim, as you being the purveyor of the paranormal podcast, I think your show should be first. So I'm going to hand that one over to you. You get the first interview with them. But hey, look, I mean, if we've learned anything from Carl Sagan and stuff like Contact, look at what our first transmission was that was sent out to an alien civilization. It was a broadcast of Hitler during the Olympics back in Germany. So that's scary to think that, maybe it takes centuries for our transmissions to get out to them. And they're looking at stuff back in the 30s and 40s where I think us as a society and of humanity have evolved since then. So I don't know. Maybe they are tapping our phones and looking at our broadcasts and watching our television shows right now. I couldn't tell you, but it's a scary thought, but an exciting one nonetheless, I guess.
Aaron wants to know the Scout, so it came and changed direction once it came to us. Did it orbit our planet? I don't believe it orbited our planet and changed direction. How much time did it spend in our system? So maybe you can, and by the way, everybody, check out for the full details. Make sure you listen to Somewhere in the Skies or watch Somewhere in the Skies so you can get the full scope of it. We don't want to steal all of the thunder here, but talk about its flight path a little bit if you could, Ryan.
Yes. Okay. So I am no astrophysicist. I cannot pretend to know how trajectories work or any of this sort of thing. It did not orbit our planet. That much I know. It was not close enough to do something of that sort. If it was, we would have gotten our satellites on it and taken photos and gotten video. So as far as I know, it was a vast distance from any of our planets. The closest thing it came to was the sun. Which is interesting since that is, kind of what all of our planets orbit around. So I can't pretend to have a scientific answer for that. But as far as I know, and according to Avi, it stopped and it left. So why did it leave? I couldn't tell you. But yeah, that's really as far as I could go in terms of answering that with my limited scientific knowledge.
Now, what do you make with all this stuff going on with the government these days? You had those files released by the CIA. You had language about UFOs written, I think, into the COVID bill. What do you make of what's going on? Do you think that within the government there are people warring and one camp wants to disclose and the other camp doesn't? Do you think that somebody in power really wants, we've got the new administration. I don't really know their perspective on it, but what are your thoughts on what's going on? Because it seems like there's a lot of jockeying in the government concerning UFO information.
Warring is a very good word. And I know that for a fact that there are people in the intelligence agencies who want this information out to the public, and there are others who do not. And I can speak to that by saying that at the Debrief, the website that we work for over there, we were handed literally 2 leaked reports from this Pentagon task force. Individuals who wanted us to put this out to the public, that this is what the Pentagon UFO task force that was created recently in the Department of Defense and Navy Intelligence, that they wanted to show us, and we put it out to the public. I don't think a lot of the people in those agencies were happy that they did that. And obviously I can't name the sources or who this
Of
came
course.
from. They are trusted individuals that we vetted extremely well. I should say Tim McMillan, the author of this leaked report article we put out, vetted. And there are individuals who want it out and those who do not. And you mentioned this COVID relief bill. This is crazy. Within this big omnibus, this oh gosh, $2.3 trillion omnibus COVID relief bill, there was a little thing in there about this UAP task force and the Senate Intelligence Committee requesting a report from them about their findings,
Yeah,
about what they're discovering.
Jonathan's like UFO language written into the COVID bill.
It's crazy. Of course, that's how it would get in there. But hey, we'll take it. We will take it. And and that it made it through astounds me. So within the next 140 something days, Jonathan might be able to correct me on that. They have to make their findings public. The issue with that, Jim, is I recently spoke to the spokesperson at the Pentagon who said, "You're not going to see anything. Everything that this task force is working on is classified." So I don't know what to believe anymore. Is the
I
public
think
going
I
to
believe
get
that
anything?
person. I don't think we're going to hear anything.
I think we
I'm a
should temper
skeptic.
our expectations. Yeah, I am too. I am
Now,
too.
let me ask you this, and I don't know if you've had discussions with your sources and people in the know. Do you think this administration is more friendly to the idea of disclosing information? I think with every information, every administration that comes in and leaves, you think, oh, there's going to be a big disclosure. You know, people have talked about with Clinton, not so much Bush, I don't think, but certainly with Obama and then Trump, because Trump, I don't want to get political, but he was a different kind of president. And if somebody was going to release stuff, kind of do something unexpected, you could have seen a Trump doing that. And then Biden, you would think, would be a little more conventional in his approach. But what do you think about the new administration coming in as it pertains to the UFO question?
Without even getting into politics, I think as individuals within this new administration, I have hope that they might be a bit more receptive. I think when it came to the previous president, there was hopes that something would be tweeted at 3 a.m. about this is what crashed in Roswell. And look, like I was even waiting for that myself, but it didn't seem to happen. With this new administration, it's simply statistics. We look at someone like our new vice president, Kamala Harris. She was a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and she was briefed on the UFO issue by members of the Navy and by former members that worked within the intelligence agencies. And again, we can look at someone like Biden, who was connected to Obama, who was connected to John Podesta, who was a huge
Yes.
advocate for
Yeah.
UFO disclosure to the public. So, by sheer numbers alone, I think there is a greater interest within this administration about the topic of UFOs, and especially the connections and relationships to people who have left the government. People like Luis Elizondo, the former head of the Pentagon UFO program, or Christopher Mellon, who worked in the Senate Intelligence Committee and got that bill, that little section passed within the COVID relief bill. So I think we have a lot more connections and a lot more hope that we will get something out of all this. What it is, I can't tell you, but I'm going to eagerly await it for sure.
Now, I know that you interviewed Ben Hansen recently of UFO Witness, that new Discovery Plus show, and I interviewed him this last week, and you tuned in a little bit on the live stream. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Something he talked about, and I want to this is a little bit putting you on the spot, just a little bit, is we talked about a continuum of belief. And you've got on one side, you've got people who say, no, there isn't any contact and there's never going to be contact. Then you've got people who say, well, there probably is life out there. We haven't made contact yet, but it's very likely, it's out there. Then you've got people say, well, maybe something like Loeb says, is true, that they've flown by, but they've not actually visited here. They might be out there and it might be close. The International Space Station and some of the controversy around possible sightings around that, and even people speculating about the Apollo missions, if they had seen some things that were covered up. So maybe there's a possibility that they've been seen in space, but they've not been here. Then you've got people who say, not only have they been here, they abduct people, they visit people. I just interviewed Whitley Strieber a couple weeks ago, although he doesn't call them ET, he calls them the visitors. But the point being that, not only they're here, they're interacting, there's hybrid programs, there's things. Now, here's the question, Ryan Sprague, and it's a little bit, again, putting you on the spot. Where do you consider yourself on that continuum of belief?
Oh, man. This is probably the first time I'm ever going to say this, but I'm probably a centrist when it comes to this, if we're putting labels. Look, it's hard, Jim. I mean, I just wrote an article about a guy who's looking for alien signals in China. But then I've also interviewed people, like you said, like Whitley Strieber, who've claimed they've been abducted by visitors or had a close encounter with a non-human intelligence. So much of what I do and what a lot of UFO researchers do is we collect reports, we collect testimony, and the gap, the spectrum of, a UFO crash and we have never even made contact yet is huge. So I change day to day. I really do.
Yeah.
And I can't pretend that that it's not frustrating or it's not easy. But look, every time I come out with an article about SETI looking for radio signals, I get 100 comments like, why are they wasting their time? We already know we're here. We already know that. My answer to someone like that is, you might know that. That might be your truth, but for the public overall, they're not aware of that. So much of what we deal with is anecdotal in this field. So I take every story that I hear, I take some sort of value out of it, and I try to integrate it into, okay, so you say this happened, but these scientists are saying that we've never actually made contact yet. So I don't know. I can't pretend to have a straight answer for that, but I'm kind of where Ben is on this whole thing. I believe that the individuals who claim they've seen UFOs, they've had a close encounter, I believe that they believe this happened. And that may be a passive way to go about it, but hey, that's all I can do when it comes to witness testimony. Unless they can bring me out to where it happened and I can find a piece of that UFO or footprints from an alien, all I have is the story. And I think there's a lot of value in that. Without witnesses, there's nothing to report. There's nothing to look at. So it's hard. It's really hard, that continuum you speak of. I struggle every day with it.
And in fairness, I'll answer the question because I kind of nailed you with the question, so it wouldn't be fair if I tried to get off. I probably lean, not that I totally discount possible alien abduction or hybrid programs. I'm probably one of those people who believe that they've been here. In the sense of like things like Kecksburg and Roswell, that there's actually been crashes, that the government knows more than they're saying. When we get into abduction cases, my skeptical side turns in a little bit until I have actual proof. So I'm probably a little more to the believer. I'm not quite the centrist. I'm probably, whether that's center right or left, I don't know, but what in the continuum of UFO belief, but I'm probably, they've been here, they've buzzed our aircraft, those kind of things have happened. But far as having lunch every Thursday, third Thursday of the month with aliens, that starts to become a little more hard for me to buy into. But not saying it's not impossible. It's kind of like my view on Bigfoot, is that most of the time I'm a skeptic, but then when I talk to people or I see that Gimlin film on Bigfoot, and if you see that thing stabilized, that does not look like a suit. It looks like muscle tone under that fur. So again, it is a little bit of the, tell me what day it is and I'll tell you what I think. Kind of like you, but I only thought it fair that I address it since I asked you to do the same.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, and I think that's important. Everyone has their own belief on this topic of UFOs and it ranges drastically, and that's okay. Because, I mean, when you have these people within the government, someone like Luis Elizondo or these Navy pilots saying, look, what we saw, it was not ours, it was not Russia, it was not China. That doesn't leave a whole lot of extra interpretation other than it wasn't from here. So I do put a lot of stock into claims like that it's not ours, not America, not another nation. So what does that mean? It could be anything,
Yeah.
literally anything else but another nation.
Yeah, one of the stories that is near and dear to my heart because I know the person personally is, and it just came up because Larry King, the great broadcaster, just passed. And a lot of people were playing that clip with Dr. Bob Jacobs and Bill Nye. That was making the rounds on the internet, where Dr. Jacobs tells the story where he was running a film program in Big Sur, California, and filmed something shooting an American missile out of this guy in 1964, I believe it was. I believe that 100%. Now, I'm biased because basically Dr. Jacobs was my professor in school for broadcasting, and he told me and a group of other students the same exact story in the early 1990s. But again, I believe him. So I believe there is something going on. Just, it's more of a question of gradation for me.
Yeah.
Now, and John said, I like this. Where are you on the scale between Carl Sagan and Bill Burns? I thought that was good.
That's good. Yeah.
Bill asks, what are your thoughts on Roswell? Was it just a weather balloon?
That's a great question. I mean, I personally investigated Roswell on several occasions now, in depth, more than I'd like to admit, actually. And no, whatever it was not a weather balloon. That much I could tell you for sure. And that comes from the testimony of hundreds of individuals. That comes from the gentleman who wrote the manual on the Mogul weather balloon program that was said to be the explanation by the US Air Force on what Roswell was. And when you have the person who created the manual on Project Mogul say, no, that was not what I did. That was not my Mogul project. That's telling me something. And with all the individuals I have interviewed and all the amazing testimony that so many researchers throughout the years have collected, Don Schmidt, Stanton Friedman, Frank Kimbler, the list is endless. No, I don't believe it was a weather balloon. But I'm also not one to immediately say that it was alien. There were so many top secret things going on at the time that the Roswell incident happened with very, very early spaceflight experimentation. This was kind of where it was starting to sprout. So maybe it was some very top secret classified project, and that's what it was. And even up to this day, they're not willing to tell us what it was. So, again, I can't pretend to say that Roswell was definitely extraterrestrial, but a lot of the evidence seems to lean that way. So many people said that they saw bodies at the crash site, and I cannot discount that either. I mean, these are perfectly credible, sane individuals who worked within the military claiming these things in affidavits signed by them. So, I don't know. I can't pretend to know what Roswell was, but I can sure as heck tell you it was not a weather balloon. And there was a cover-up, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I just think you look at that newspaper article where they talk about a flying disc, and all of a sudden it wasn't a flying disc. It's like something is rotten in Denmark, or is in Roswell, as the case may be.
In Roswell, yeah.
Yeah, Sandy wants to know, Jim and Ryan, have either of you studied the Zachariah Sitchin materials about our true ancestry? I'll say, as for me, I can't say I've studied them. I've certainly done interviews on them, but I bet you that Ryan has in a lot greater depth.
I wish I could say yes, Jim. As far as I am aware, the individuals who look into the ancient alien theory and whatnot, a lot of what they have come up with is from the work of Zachariah. So, look, I'm completely open to the possibilities. I don't know exactly what she means about ancestry. I don't know if that means some sort of
I think it's more
ancient
of a
program that
hybrid.
we were alien. I don't
Yeah,
know.
hybridization, those type of things, if I'm remembering correctly. That kind of, they were like a star seed kind of situation,
Hey,
if I
I'm
remember
open to the
correctly.
possibility. I mean, if we look at something like panspermia and that we were seeded from another solar system or planet and evolved here on Earth somehow, and we were seeded, that's very interesting. Are we aliens on our own planet? I
Yeah.
think it's an interesting theory and one that I think we'll be asking until we finally get to Mars, until we finally get to Europa and find that there's there's signs of life there and it could have been us. So yeah, I think it's fascinating, but I can't pretend to be an expert on it in any way, shape, or form.
Uh, Bree says it's an interesting perspective. I think these UFOs are terrestrial, just military. My personal viewpoint is you're partially right. I think that some UFOs are definitely military. And I mean, we tend to think of the height of military avionics right now as something like the stealth bomber. Stealth bomber's 40 years old. We have no idea what the
Right.
military has. But to me, and this is just my opinion, it doesn't have to be an either or question, right? It could be some UFOs are definitely military and some are definitely something else. What say you, Ryan Sprague?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as a UFO researcher, uh, I feel it's my responsibility not to prove that UFOs are alien or extraterrestrial or interdimensional. I want to find a conventional explanation to give somebody. You know, it was a weather phenomenon. It was a stealth bomber. I mean, look, I had a UFO sighting in 1995 of a triangular formation of lights, and I did not know what it was. For many years, I thought maybe what I saw was extraterrestrial. But as I've gone on in years and done more research, spoken to my father, who was also a witness of this UFO event with me, and then going back and really digging, I think I may have explained my own sighting. There was a air show in Syracuse, New York, in central New York, at the same time the summer that I saw the object I saw, and they were displaying a stealth bomber at this air show. So it's very possible that what I saw that night could have
Sure.
been something leaving from this air show. And that's awesome. I have an explanation, a possible explanation. I can't definitively say that's what it was, but I think 99% of UFO sightings can probably be explained in some conventional way. And a lot of it is definitely military, a lot of it. But there's always, as we say, that 10% that go unexplained. And that's what keeps me going is, well, then what was it? Especially
Right.
when the military's saying it's not ours and it's not China. So I agree. I agree. A lot of it is military. Absolutely. But there's always that little bit that keeps me going that it's got to be something else and it ain't from here.
Tanya says something that I kind of agree with. I'm terrified of aliens. History shows us what happens when advanced people cross paths with less advanced people. And I guess you could extend that logically as a thought experiment. If they're not people, but they're aliens from another planet or another star system, wherever the case may be. Yeah, certainly I think that was kind of Stephen Hawking's feeling about it. So pretty smart guy.
Absolutely. And I mean, look, you look at something like War of the Worlds, a commentary on a sense of colonialism that, while us in England and Europe and America are colonizing different areas of this planet and taking over, what would happen if something from another planet came and did that to all of us? So I think that's a very fascinating concept. And I think that's why people fear aliens, because it is very possible. And mathematically, there has to be something out there, some sort of alien, whether it's microbial or intelligent. So that's scary to think about, that we're not the smartest. And while we might be on the top of the food chain here on Earth, we certainly aren't in the entire universe for sure. So that's what I
There's
think.
an interesting theory that I've read about lately, and I'd never thought about it until the last few months. But there's a line of speculation is the reason that we've not made contact, and these are from people who don't believe that we've made contact, but their line of thinking is once a civilization reaches a certain amount of technology, they develop the ability to destroy themselves, just like we have. So what happens is is that before they can get to fruition so we could meet, they've already destroyed themselves. Which is an interesting, because I mean, I think sometimes we tend to think, well, not only are they technologically more savvy than us, they're morally maybe possibly smarter than us. And they've kind of risen above the petty squabbles we have on Earth. Well, what if they haven't? And what if they're just like us? And maybe what if they're warlike and they have the same tendencies that we do and they blew themselves up? What do you think about that line of thought?
I'm so happy you bring this up because so many scientists out there, or philosophers, or anyone within those fields say that, of course, if there is an alien civilization, they are far more advanced, which means they've moved past that. They're enlightened. They're not going to come here to destroy us. But I don't, in my gut, I don't understand that. Just because they are far more advanced does not mean that they are benevolent by any means. It astounds me that so many people are willing to just accept that oh yeah, if they come, like, they're here to save us, or
Star
they're
Brothers.
space brothers, they're here to warn us of impending doom. And that may be true for one intelligence, but it does not mean that if there are others out there that they would have the same motives. Look, we as Americans, we go all over the world trying to put our influence on other nations, or presidencies and whatnot, and we don't have the same intentions with every single country. So I'm with you. I don't understand why they would have to be ethical and moral. Do they even have that ability?
And some might be and some might not. We tend to talk about them in a monolith. But if there's more than one group, there could be a really great group who want to serve man, not as a cookbook, but really serve man. And there might be the other one out there that's got the cookbook out. I mean, I think both, they're not mutually exclusive.
They are not. I mean, you put it so eloquent, Jim. I can't even really expand on that. Let's not be the cookbook. So that's all I have to say.
That's right. Ryan, are you also looking into the possibility that there are also USOs or subterranean under the ice? There have been reports of this possibility. I think going back, Christopher Columbus supposedly saw something strange underwater, and that's going back a few years. So what are your thoughts on USOs and all of that?
Well, coincidentally, you'll see that poster behind me there of Puerto Rico. Yes, Christopher Columbus, while traveling in that area near Puerto Rico, had a UFO sighting, something that emerged from the water and went in the sky and disappeared. And coincidentally enough, one of these leaked reports by the Pentagon Task Force given to us at the Debrief was about a UFO emerging from the water. A pilot caught this on camera, emerged from the water, went into the sky, and disappeared. Supposedly, there are photos of this. Maybe we'll see them. I can't really say at this point, but USOs are absolutely fascinating. It seems that a lot of the research right now is leaning that way, that our oceans are probably the most mysterious thing on our planet. And while
you stole the words out of my mouth, it's the perfect place to hide.
Aliens. Exactly, Jim. Thank you. Yeah, we're looking for aliens in space when, there are so many undiscovered things in our oceans still to this day, and we probably will never discover everything down there. So I think it's very fascinating. I think a lot of the mysteries that we are actually looking for answers to may still lie here on our planet. So I think we need to start doing that. I'm part of a group of expeditioners who are going to be going out to where the Tic Tac UFO event occurred in California, off the coast of California. And they're going to go back there and they're going to put stuff in the water to see what they can discover. Because supposedly, whatever those Navy pilots saw in 2004 came out of the water. So I think it's fascinating. I think we've only begun to scratch the surface of the ocean when it comes to these things. And I look forward to what comes next in that, for sure.
Sandy had a nice note here. She said, not a question, but if you read any of the Sitchin books, you might start, or you haven't read it, sounds like she meant, you might start with the 12th planet. Thank you for the recommendation. We appreciate the feedback from the audience, all the great questions we've had. Ryan, two things in closing. First of all, what story that we've not discussed that is exciting you the most these days? Something we didn't touch on today.
This one I actually came across this morning, so you'll have to forgive me if I'm looking at notes here, Jim. Um, if we're dealing with USOs, and it seems to be that a lot of what's going on now is happening with the Navy, which is interesting because you would think that when it comes to the military and UFOs, we'd be dealing with the Air Force, but they have been unusually quiet about all of this, which actually speaks more volumes to me of them not talking about it. But the Navy is being very open right now. In fact, I have a phone meeting with a Navy press person in a few hours about 5 UFO incidents that happened on one of their bases. So
Wow.
the transparency occurring right now with the Navy is admirable and commendable. And I have to salute the Navy for taking the lead on this topic. I think it's amazing. That being said, it was discovered, I think, in the last 6 months or so, that the Navy had patents on UFOs. They literally were putting all these scientific papers within their development programs and whatnot about UFOs. And they were working with this gentleman, Salvatore Pais, on the theoretical concept of high intensity electromagnetic fields. I want to get this right. And the Navy was actually like, yeah, here you go. Here's hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you can tap into that and we can use it and harness it in whether it's our planes or our carriers on the ocean or anything in that nature, do it. And a lot of these UFOs that have been claimed to be out there use electromagnetic technology. As far as we're aware, and as far as people have theorized, they've moved past fuel. They moved past a lot of propulsion that we use here on the planet. They're straight up using anti-gravity. So the Navy was like, okay, if our Navy pilots are saying that they saw this unknown object do this, how can we do it? How can we now use that? So it's almost a reverse engineering of theory. And they gave this guy, this scientist, a ton of money to do it. So you can actually read the patents, and they're very compelling. So I'll be sure to send you some links on that when I find out more about it. But
Excellent.
the Navy is
Excellent.
building UFOs. That's the exciting thing for 2021 for sure.
Well, Heidi had this question. I think I have an answer. Heidi says, sometimes on the campfire an abductee story comes up since Bud Hopkins passed. Are there any experts that you can refer them to? I would think maybe Ryan Sprague might be the right guy. Also, Ryan, love the Witness episodes the best.
Thank you.
So
That's extremely flattering. I do a series called Witness Accounts where you tell your stories. It's just like Campfire. It's my version of Campfire where people come on and they tell their experiences in their own voices. So they're very powerful. They take the lead, and I love doing those. So thank you. On a separate note, when it comes to who I could suggest, I'm always willing to listen. I'm a great listener. I've been trained as a playwright here in New York City to just listen to people and how they react, what they have to say. So I am always willing to hear people's stories. But other than that, there are still abduction researchers out there. The niece of Betty Hill, one of the most famous UFO abductees of all time, Kathleen Martin is one of them. And I know, Jim, you've spoken to her in the past. She's one of the brightest and most empathetic individuals I've ever met, and has really done a lot of fantastic work when it comes to experiencers and those who have claimed alleged abduction experiences. So I would say she's probably the leading pioneering force right now in the abduction realm. So check out the work of Kathleen Martin for sure. I can't recommend that enough.
And speaking of checking out some work, you need to check out the work of Ryan Sprague. Ryan, I know they can find you at somewhereintheskies.com. You've got the book, you've got the podcast. Tell everybody the litany and, of course, the new writing that you're doing for the Debrief, where they can find everything.
Thank you, Jim. And of course, it's always an honor to come on here with you. Everything I do is at somewhereintheskies.com, from the podcast to the book to articles. You can find everything there. The book was just recently released in audiobook. So you can just go over to Amazon and find either the print, the ebook, or the audiobook there. Other than that, I am writing almost daily at thedebrief.org. Please go check out everything we have over there. We just started a podcast as well for the Debrief. So we are hungrily working in these weird times we're living in to get the most updated and exciting news in space and tech and science, and looking forward, the outlook. What can we look forward to moving forward in this strange world we live in? So thedebrief.org and somewhereintheskies.com. You can find everything there.
Very good. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. It's always great to speak with you. And if you hang on, we'll have a short debrief after we end this broadcast. And thank you again, Ryan. Everybody check out Ryan Somewhere in the Skies, also thedebrief.org. Thedebrief.org. I'll say it again. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, James. Thank you so much.
And if you enjoy this show, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. We would love for you to do that. We appreciate it so much when you tune in. And thank you so much for everything. Well, looks like we've about finished another one. And we certainly appreciate it. We're going to keep doing those live streams next week. We're hoping to do a Campfire Deep Dive Live. We're working on coordinating the caller. A person kind of disappeared. So maybe it's some kind of magic, but hopefully we'll be able to get a hold of them. And we're going to have more great guests that we later will put up on the Paranormal Podcast on the audio feeds. We thank you so much. As always, stay safe and stay spooky. Bye-bye, everybody.